Hi, I'm Lauren Borderkins, and today I'm going to discuss groupthink theory. If you'll move to the next slide, you'll see an overview of what I'm going to discuss today. We're going to talk about a definition of groupthink, what is it, why does it happen. We're going to talk about its high potential for fatal outcomes. We'll talk about some of the evidence in certain events in the past that have happened to show that groupthink does in fact happen and that it has fatal outcomes. We'll talk about the 1996 Mount Everest expedition that ended in disaster. And then we'll talk about 3 preventative methods for groupthink, along with a conclusion. So what is groupthink theory? Well, it was a theory developed by Irving Janis in the early 1970s through early 1980s. According to Janis, who is a Yale University psychologist, groupthink stands for an excessive form of concurrent seeking among members of a high prestige or tightly knit policy-making group. If you'll move to the next slide, you'll see a detailed model of Janis's groupthink theory. It goes over the antecedents, symptoms, defects, and outcomes. I don't have a lot of time today, so I can't go over all of that in detail. But what we can do is move to the next slide and discuss how groupthink has a high potential for fatal outcomes. This is because a lot of the groups that are dealing with these types of situations and decisions to be made for policies or in crisis situations, they have high pressure. There's cohesion within the group. They want to seem like they're loyal to the group. The members do, so they don't want to say anything negative or have any negative things said about them and their ideas. So they perceive it as being loyal to the group, just agreeing with what the group feels like is necessary. So they don't speak up, they self-censor themselves. Even if they know there may be a concern, they try to keep that to themselves. And they don't evaluate any alternatives. They see alternatives as a threat. Any external threat is a threat to the group, so they don't like to evaluate alternatives. They believe that because everybody has a consensus or a unanimous agreement in the decision, that the decision they're making is the best one. And there's evidence of fatal outcomes in groupthink. For many years now, we see there's a 1973 agricultural crisis in Ghana, Africa. The 1986 NASA Challenger accident, which is viewed as one of the main components of groupthink. NASA's been targeted several times for groupthink and disasters that they've had. There's the 1996 Mount Everest expedition, which is what I'm going to go over today, and as well as the Ford Pinto disaster and Fayetteville Air Force Base collision. So if you'll go ahead and move to the next slide, you'll see detail of the events from the 1996 Mount Everest expedition. There were 2 expert climbers, Hall and Fisher, that were going to lead expeditions. Each climber paid about $65,000 to go climb Mount Everest. And the media was going to document and film this as well. So we already have a high pressure situation. There's this pressure to make it to the top and to make sure everybody makes it successful. And there's obviously a large investment from the climbers in this as well. As they move along the climb, a few things happen to create an even more high stress situation. Some of the tools, the climbing tools, were damaged. They found out that some of the ropes had been torn or they had unraveled and they needed to be repaired before they could move on. A Sherpa brought this to their attention 3 times to the experts. There was also inclement weather, where they probably should have turned back. They decided to move on. Another issue is time. So basically, the conventional safety standard would be at 3 p.m. you would decide if you were going to move on a little bit further and then make camp, or go ahead and make camp where you were. But you would probably not make it to the top at this point unless you were already at they call it the dead zone, where you have to wear oxygen tank because there is not enough oxygen for you to make it to the top. But they decided to move ahead, and it was close to 5 o'clock p.m., which is very dangerous. They also did not allow other climbers to voice any concerns about moving on or what they should do. They felt that they should leave it up to the experts, Hall and Fisher. They told them that any concerns anyone had would be addressed after the climb. So they moved ahead with the climb. People started to get sick. They started to get ill. Some of them had severe frostbite, and they realized they were not going to be able to make it due to the inclement weather. They had people try to rescue, and they couldn't make it because of the inclement weather. So unfortunately, 15 people died. So what can we do to prevent fatal outcomes by groupthink? Let's look at 3 preventative methods for groupthink. One is self-esteem. If a member has confidence and self-esteem, then they'll be able to voice any concerns that they have, to speak out against any issues or decisions that are going to be made, to question them. Had the climbers had more self-esteem, they may have questioned some of the safety in the decisions that were being made. Another method is open discussion. Open discussion allows for the evaluation of alternatives. Had the climbers been able to voice their concerns as they were hindered to do, they would have been able to evaluate whether they wanted to wait and have camp there, or if they wanted to go ahead and turn back. They were not given that option, so it's important that we implement open discussion in any decision-making process. Another method is dissemination of information. This is helpful because it allows the members of the group and the group itself to make the best informed decision they can. The climbers did not have access to the information about the damaged tools, the inclement weather that was approaching, or the time constraints. Had the climbers been aware of these issues, perhaps they would have decided on something else. So let's look at the conclusion of all this. We talked about the definition and explanation of groupthink. What is it and how does it happen, or why does it happen? We talked about different fatal outcomes, such as Ford Pinto, NASA, and we went over in detail the 1996 Mount Everest expedition. We talked about 3 preventative methods: self-esteem, open discussion, and dissemination of information. So the take-home from all of this is to speak up. Speak out your concerns. It's okay if you feel like you're in a tight-knit group, but it's important for you to voice any concerns, even if they're not agreeable to other people in the group. Because if it is a decision where lives are at stake, then it's a decision that needs to be evaluated. It needs to be taken seriously, and it needs to have an open discussion between all members without the fear of being alienated from the group or an outcast. So don't be afraid to speak up to prevent groupthink. Thank you and have a great day.